So Eddie Howe just held his morning press conference at Newcastle United's training ground ahead of that crunch game against Nottingham Forest on Friday night at the City Ground, and a lot of discussion today about, in the aftermath of Newcastle's win over Wolves, was about Eddie Howe's selection process. If you remember, before the game against Wolves, we've seen the team sheet and Miguel Almiron, the top scorer, he'd been dropped, and Jamal Lascelles, who came into the team at Man City, he was also not included from the start. There was a few injury issues with the likes of Anthony Gordon. Joe Linton, of course, was suspended, but Alexander Isak started ahead of Callum Wilson, who we've later learned has been struggling with an illness. But Eddie Howe wanted to make it crystal clear today in his press conference that he must be allowed to do this to his team, especially as we hit those last 13 games. He says that the physical demands on his team that he puts on himself mean that some players, will have to take a rest at some point. They'll have to have a breather, and I think that's all fair game, especially when you look at the decisions last week. Almiron benched, but then coming on to score the winner, and I think that said it all. Really, it was a really timely thing to happen in that game for Eddie Howe. It has been a long season for Newcastle, and they know now that they're on the final straight, and injuries are starting to creep in the squad. You've seen today Anthony Gordon, they're slightly concerned about his ankle injury. Eddie Howe describing the scan as not plain sailing, and he's certainly not going to be involved against Forest. Whether he's involved against Man United, we'll have to wait and see. But other knocks beginning to creep into the squad. Callum Wilson, again, not seen training so far this week. Doesn't mean he's not going to play, but certainly in the build-up we haven't seen much of him. And really, for Newcastle now, going into this crucial period, they're going to need everyone. Eddie Howe said today the majority of the squad should be available for Forest, so that is a little hint that there could be a couple of absentees. He did say a couple of players haven't trained this week, so we'll have to wait and see exactly what squad turns up at the City Ground. But for Newcastle, Eddie Howe really keen today to emphasise that he will have to rest and rotate going into these last 13 games. Some tough games coming up. I think that after the international break, it's Man United at home, and then it's four consecutive away games. Very difficult for Newcastle, so they need to make sure everyone is fresh and ready to kick on for what's going to be a really exciting run-in. Remember, Newcastle still in contention for all three European competitions. You hope it's going to be the Champions League. Could be the Europa League, could be the Europa Conference League. We'll have to wait and see. It would take a dramatic slide, of course, to not be involved in any three of those competitions, but we've seen strange things happen with Newcastle United down the years. Hopefully not this time. But it's all about that game against Nottingham Forest. Eddie Howe acknowledging tough game in prospect. He knows Forest have been brilliant at home this season, but he goes there in confident frame of mind and knowing Newcastle go there on the back of that 2-1 win against Wolves, and hopefully they can pull off a similar result at the City Ground.